Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Weird Business, a very strange anthology, and it's edited by Joe R. Lansdale and Richard Claw. Joe R. Lansdale, great horror author, also great comics author, responsible for a lot of those, all of those Jonah Hex miniseries from Vertigo Comics in the 90s. Also probably best known for Bubba Hotep, the story he wrote that was adapted into a movie, actually a very great movie. I recommend it highly. And the other editor is Richard Claw, who I think he did a lot of just black and white comics in the 80s, 90s, never anything that big. The reason why this is such a interesting anthology is because this is actually a hardcover book, of over 400-page, very nicely produced hardcover book with a dust jacket and everything. So it's kind of weird. They could have put this out as 40 little, 25 little comics. But they just figured, let's just make this huge, gigantic omnibus. Start off with a nice Dave Dorman cover. You may know him from his Star Wars paintings. He did a lot of covers for Dark Horse. And did a lot of other stuff too. Pretty nice cover. I'm going to get rid of this dust jacket. Nothing too fancy on the inside. Get to see pictures of the editors there. That's about it. So as you can see, very nice book. This was published by Mojo Press, which is a really interesting company that only lasted a few years in the 90s. They were based in Austin, Texas, and they were kind of they seemed kind of cheap. The stuff they put out was full of all these newcomers, guys you never really saw before, cartoonists who weren't really that experienced. But then they also had the rights to put out the Young Blueberry graphic novels by Charlier and Girard. And they had a connection with Michael Moorcock where they were adapting, they were going to do his Elric stories as graphic novels. So they seemed kind of cheap and bottom shelf. But then they also had these weird, huge authors who usually didn't even write for comics working with them. So it was very interesting, this company. I wish they lasted longer. They had some neat stuff. Got a really long tables of contents because this is a really long book. Introduction by Joe R. Lansdale. And we start off with Gorilla Gunslinger. This is written by Norman Partridge, and don't know much about that guy. It looks like he just did a lot of black and white comics in the 90s. And drawn by John Garcia, who did Owl Hoots for Kitchen Sink, did a bunch of stuff for Dark Horse. He was always popping up on kind of titles that no one really cared about, to be honest. I do like how this collection has introductory pages before every story, telling you about the contributors. So here we go, Gorilla Gunslinger, Arizona Territory, 1874. And here he is. This is a really fun comic. I wish there was more of these Gorilla Gunslingers. I would totally buy these. And as you can see there, it's very nice, very classic art style. This prelude is kind of weird. We see Gorilla Gunslinger, who's I should say his name's Manjo, which is short for Kilimanjaro. And he's riding by all these characters who will soon impact him, who we'll soon meet. It's almost like a dramatic personae. We're seeing all these characters that we're about to meet, but they're not interacting yet. So he goes to this saloon, and the bartender says, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't serve no," and Manjo says, "Africans?" And he's like, no, we just don't serve fugitive desperados, because he's wanted, Manjo, for all kinds of crimes. So Manjo says, "Buy me a beer, I'll explain everything." So I guess he grew up in Africa in this weird undiscovered valley where the apes were intelligent, almost like Gorilla Grodd in DC Comics. Some Europeans came, or some Americans came, and they captured him, and they sold him to P.T. Barnum's circus. So he's basically like a slave. He escaped and made it out to the Old West. And then, right on cue, these 3 clowns, literal clowns, come into the bar. And they're like, "We're here to take you back, Manjo. You're our property. You're P.T. Barnum's property. And you got to come back to the circus. So they got a little showdown going on. And then that woman in the pith helmet that we saw, her name's Nevada Pine, she comes in and tries to break it up. She says, "Can't you see he's the greatest scientific marvel of the century? You can't gut him down. It's a talking gorilla, for Christ's sake." And they're like, "We don't care. He's our property." So they have a big gunfight, and they kill all the clowns. And so when he goes outside, these guys are waiting for him. The Sons of Adam. They're like this crazy, fanatical, evangelical, like soldiers for Christ. They're almost like the Iranian National Guard, you know? They're killers. They're psycho. But supposedly it's all because they want a godly world. Man, you can really see Garcia channeling John Severin in this comic. Obviously, it's not as good as John Severin. What is? But definitely very Severin-esque. It looks pretty good. I think he does a good job. So when the Sons of Adam come in, they find one of the clowns, I guess, isn't quite dead. And he tells them about how, yeah, I guess that those gorillas, they grew up in that little valley. It's parallel evolution. And this really pisses off the Sons of Adam guy, because they don't believe in evolution. That's why they're after Monjo, because Monjo proves evolution in their eyes. He's an abomination, you know? And so they find out from the bartender that Monjo and Nevada are heading to the next town over, where Nevada's sister lives. So they steal, well, they don't have to steal it because they're dead. They take the P.T. Barnum balloon, and they're going to get to the town before him. So they land right near the public schoolhouse where Nevada's sister works. And she happens to be teaching the kids about evolution that day. Here we can really see some Severin stuff going on. So they get all their weapons, and they kick down the door. And they start arguing with her about evolution. She's not backing down. She says you can't hide from scientific fact. Very relevant today. God, look at that. He whomps her with a huge Bible. That looks really violent. And then he just guns her down. He says the Lord has no truck with gorilla lovers. I checked. That's in the Bible. And then he's planning on killing these kids. He's praying to God. He's saying, have their minds been sullied forever by this abomination of evolution? Should I kill them then? And then he hears a voice, reading scripture, booming from outside. And he thinks it's God. He runs out. It's like, "I'm coming, Lord, I'm coming." And it's Monjo reading from the Bible, which of course pisses these guys off. I just want to say, I also see some Paul Galassi in here too. And Monjo and Nevada totally gun these guys down. Kill all the Sons of Adam. And then it looks like this was just going to be the beginning of the Gorilla Gunslinger saga. Because he kind of basically vows that he's going to hunt down the rest of these Sons of Adam, sons of bitches. She asks him, "Just what is your business, Monjo?" "I deal in extinction." The end. I wish there was more of that. Becoming the Monster, next story, written by Poppy Z. Bright. She was kind of a hot shit horror author in the 90s. Kind of hip, I guess. And it's illustrated by Miran Kim. And Kim, I remember him. He did all those X-Files covers for Topps Comics in the 90s. Very trying to be like Dave McKean. Very painterly. But this art in here is kind of, frankly, amazing. I don't know if it's like my favorite art I've ever seen, but the level of craft in here, I don't know if some of these are photos or not. Maybe they are, so maybe he's fully doing a Dave McKean, mixing up photography and art. But some of these I just can't tell. So the narrator of the story is this kind of gothy looking dude. And he's basically obsessed with this serial killer. He knows everything about him because he's a computer hacker. Here, we see him here. Look at this, what I was talking about. Look at that, how photorealistic that is. Even this bookshelf. But then again, I don't know, maybe it is photos. Oh, I just noticed he has an Ed Gein poster on his wall. So he's like one of those, but he's really into it. It's almost like he's in love with this guy, the way he's talking about him. And he really wants to find him. And the way he's talking about him, it's almost like he doesn't even care if the guy wants to kill him, which is a very high likelihood because this guy preys on young men. He likes to frequent gay bars and take home young men and kill them. So he goes to one of these bars and he finds him. He says, I already loved you. And so he basically picks him up. And he lifts up his shirt. He's got all these scars on his chest. And he tells him through a flashback that I was your first victim. 15 years ago. He was a little boy. He was out late at night because these kids stranded him on the monkey bars. They ran off and left him. He couldn't get back down. So he was there all night. So he was easy prey. And because it was his first kill, the monster wasn't that good yet. So he didn't kill him. He totally gouged out his chest and really fucked him up. So he basically, that's why he became a computer hacker. I learned how to go to places I didn't belong and I felt safe there. Kids couldn't go to many places in the real world. And I now knew that most of those places they could go were unsafe. So I built my own world and I learned to sneak and trespass and rob just like the monster. So it's almost like it's like Stockholm syndrome. Ever since he was a kid, he was kind of in love with this guy who almost killed him. He says, I want you to teach me how to be the monster. And so they become roommates, they become lovers, and he teaches him the ways of being a serial killer. This little montage here, killing various people. Look at the face on that. That's incredible. And so one day, the monster actually says, I want you to kill me. There can only be one of us. For you to truly become the monster, you have to kill me. And it's almost like he loves the idea. He's totally into it. So the young guy kills him. He totally feels sad about it. But it's almost like the monster's ecstatic as he's being killed. So the young guy becomes the new monster. And I guess he saved the face of the monster in this, some kind of fluid. And even now, your face still haunts my dreams. Just what a sick love story. I mean, he's still in love with the guy. Next one is Till the Cows Come Home, written by Mark Evans. I think he hasn't done much. And drawn by Kenneth Huey. So I guess Kenneth Huey was in Commies from Mars. So he did some stuff. Kind of a goofy story, kind of fun cartooning, funny cartooning. And we see this old guy, and he's telling his grandson about how it all started. And he's talking about how he was at a steakhouse back when he was a little kid. And one day they looked out the window while they were eating steaks, and all these cows show up with radios tied around their necks. And then this VW Beetle covered in tinfoil and like a transmitter drives up, and the local kook comes out, and he's got all this crazy shit. He's got like 15 watches on each arm. He's got a TV remote, and he's basically in charge of the cows. He wired them up, and so all the cows could get revenge, basically. I guess he's like some radical vegetarian or something. And all the cows crash into the restaurant and round up everyone, bring them out to the streets. Everyone is forced to take anything leather they have off their bodies. And then the wacko pours gas all over it and has a big bonfire. Just kind of this, I guess, revenge of the cows. I love this. He even makes these weird Jeeps that the cows can drive around in. I guess they have a very simple way to drive. And then we're back in the prison. The grandfather's just pissed off. He's like, and then the horses joined him, and the pigs, and the cats, and the chickens, even them smart aleck dolphins. But it darn near broke my heart when the dogs turned against us. Man's best friend, hell. Nowadays, that's the noble flea. It's a goofy little story. Steel Valentine. This is adapted from a Joe R. Lansdale story and by Richard Claw. He turns it into comic form, and the artist is Mark Erickson, who once again did a lot of stuff for Dark Horse, Caliber. Nothing that anyone really probably remembers. So this is very much like a James M. Cain type story, almost maybe Jim Thompson-y. It's very just like a, hard-boiled film noir stuff. We see this guy, Dennis. He's tied to a chair. Apparently, this guy Morley is responsible for his predicament. And here he is, Morley, just basically playing head games with him while he's got him tied up. And Dennis is a flashback into the first time he met Morley's wife. Pretty soon they start having this long-term affair. And of course, Morley finds out. Morley's this big wheel. He's like the head honcho of this little town, and looks like in the Southwest somewhere. So apparently the wife had these 6 vicious Doberman pinchers, totally loyal to her. They didn't like anyone. They didn't like Morley himself. And he figured out the best way to kill her, the most poetic justice, was for the dogs to kill her. So what he did, because he's this big shot, he has connections with like this biochemical company that has contracts with the government, the military, and they have this spray, which they were basically using it to train attack dogs, military dogs. And if you spray it on someone, it'll totally make a dog want to attack you. So he turns his chair around, and we see the dead wife. She's got like chunks taken out of her. This is pretty gruesome. And the dog's there with the muzzle on his neck, and he's chained up. So basically what he did was starve this dog for 4 days and then sprayed her with that stuff. So even though he loved his mistress, his owner, he couldn't help it. He killed her. So he takes out the spray and he sprays it all over Dennis. And then he puts this collar on Dennis, which is chained to the dog's collar. And then he unmuzzles the dog and lets him go. Man, look at that. Not very well drawn, but kind of still scary. Very kind of weirdly drawn, scary dog. So they start this total fight to the death. And this is I kind of like these panels here. Just the quick glimpses of the fight. And Dennis actually gets the upper hand. Smashes a chair on the dog. The dog looks like he's down for the count, but he's not. And he gets back up. And it looks like now he's going to get Dennis. But Dennis lifts him up. And he throws him over this rafter. And the chain chokes him to death. So Morley left. He figured he was dead. So he gets out of this little cabana or whatever, and he goes to Morley's office. He's still chained to the dog. He can't unchain himself. Yeah, I don't know about this art. It looks like this guy could be really good in like 5 years. Seems like he has some basic chops, but it's definitely not quite there. It's a little amateurish. Amateurish. So then he drops the pants of Morley, sprays the shit all over his backside and his nuts. And then he sets the dogs loose on him. This next one is Stranger. It's by Brian Biggs. I don't know if you remember this guy. He had some graphic novels from Fantagraphics in the 90s. It's a definitely unique style, as you can see. Very, nobody quite drew like him. A lot of people said he kind of reminded them of like Chas Adams, Charles Adams. It's a very weird story. This guy picks up this hitchhiker. He seems like a very odd bird. And then when he asks him what he does, he says, "I'm a spy." So we find out he's pretty nuts. He says, "I have evidence that Elvis, James Dean, and Marilyn are alive. And they're living with JFK out here somewhere." And then all of a sudden he says, "Stop. Let me out here. Pull over. This is it." He's like, "Are you sure?" Because they're in the middle of nowhere. And he says, "Yeah, this is it." He says, "Good luck." And the driver says, "You too. Say hi to Marilyn." It's just a weird little story. I kind of like it, though. That Hellbound Train. This is a great story. This is adapted from Robert Bloch's famous story. Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper, some classic horror stuff. Won many like Hugo Awards and Bram Stoker Awards. It's adapted by Neil Barrett Jr. He's the guy who did lots of stuff for Dark Horse, DC, a lot of people. And it's drawn by the art team of Philip Hester and Andy Parks, who we saw, I don't know, a year ago on the Freaks of More video. And there's also apparently an assist by this guy named Andre Walls. I think he helped with the inking. Here we go. This story totally reminds me of some great Twilight Zone story or something. So we meet this guy, Martin. And Martin's like a 10-time loser. He's just always been bumming around, been a convict. His dad was a railroad man, and he always told his son about this legendary hellbound train that apparently would appear at midnight for all of the damned souls and round them up and take them down to hell. Because of Martin's record, he could never get a job on the railroad. He kind of wanted to follow in his father's footsteps, but they just never were hiring when he applied, or he probably had a record, so they didn't want to hire him. But he's thinking about that hellbound train, and he says that it seems like a great train ride because it's all these fun sinners are on it. So it's all these gamblers and loose women, and everyone's having a great time. But of course, you're eventually going to end up at the final depot in hell and have an eternity of torment. So you don't really want to ride on the train, but it does seem fun. So one night he's really down on his luck. He's just caught in the snow. He's penniless. And the hellbound train pulls up. The conductor comes out. Of course, it's Satan. You can tell by his ears. And he says, "Good evening, Martin. I think you should get on the train." He's just like, "I don't think I want to. I don't like where it ends up." He says, "But maybe if we made a deal." And the devil says, "Oh, yeah. People like to do that with me." So he says, "Okay, here's the deal. You give me the ability just one time only where I can stop time. And so I'm going to stop time whenever I'm the happiest. And it'll be like that forever. And then, of course, I'll never die, so you'll never get to collect my soul." So I think this is a good wish. And the devil pretends to act like, "Oh, you got me there. Okay." So he gives him this watch, which is basically, he says, just turn the fob backwards. And, what you got one shot. And when you think you're the happiest, you do it. And he gets back on the train and rides off. So Martin is totally motivated to make something of himself. Because he wants to get happy as he can before he does the watch. So he starts off just bumming change, works his ass off, gets all these different jobs, works his way up. He gets richer, gets more successful with the ladies. He meets a keeper and marries her. But he still doesn't stop time. He keeps thinking to himself, "Oh, this is great. I've got a beautiful wife who loves me. I've got this great kid. But maybe things will get even better. So I can't stop time now." So he keeps doing it, basically chasing the dragon. And He gets this beautiful mistress, and he's loving it. But then he gets caught in a scandal. His wife divorces him. He loses almost all of his money. So he's got to start all over again at like 55. It's a lot harder when you're older. But he does. Works his ass off, gets rich. Of course, it's not as fun. He's old. He can still enjoy his money by going on cruises and travel. But it's not like how it used to be when he was younger. You know, wining and dining beautiful women and all that shit. But he's still pretty happy. He's like, yeah, I should do it now. He's like, no, but maybe things will get better. But then he has a heart attack. And he's in the hospital, and he actually escapes. And he says, well, at least I'm free now. Maybe freedom is happiness. Maybe I should do it now. But he's like, no. And then he has another attack. Sometimes I really like Phil Hester's work, like the stylized stuff he does. When he does indie comics, his stuff for DC, like Green Arrow, that stuff's terrible to me. I think it looks actually gross. I think he's one of the worst mainstream artists ever. But he changes the style. When he does indie stuff, he has this kind of fun, really, I don't know how to describe it. Just very stylized. It's nice. So then he's just all like, well, I can't have to watch now. I don't want to be stuck like this forever, sick, lying helplessly in the grass. I mean, that would be my eternity. So fuck, I guess I'll just take that train ride. I fucked up. So the train arrives, for some reason with Batman's head on the engine, it looks like. And the conductor comes down and he says, come on, get on the train. And the devil asks for the watch back, but he kind of is stalling, and he's asking him questions about the watch. Like, what are you going to do with it next? He's like, I'm probably just going to throw it in a ditch, Martin. I don't care. I got your soul. And so he gets on the train, and it's just as great as his dad described. It looks like a big fucking party. Women dancing naked on tables, and everyone's laughing and having a good time. And so Martin says, you know, I don't think I'll ever be happier than this right now. This seems like great. And he does the watch. He does the fob. And Satan is furious. He's like, no. He's like, do you realize what you've done? All of these souls will never make it to hell. We'll be on riding this train forever. And he's like, I know. That's the plan. But he almost feels sorry for Trick of the Devil. And he says, look, maybe I can help you out. If you were to find me another one of those nice looking caps. And we see him here. He's basically the brakeman of the hellbound train now for all eternity. And it's just going to be one long party. I don't quite understand this panel, though. The way he is leaning from the train. I don't know if... I don't get it. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's a great story. It just really sums up the human condition. How many of us would probably do the same fuck up he did and just keep waiting. Like, oh, maybe I'll be happier. I want more. This next story is called Coxx, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, or maybe not. I never learned how to pronounce that word. It's written and drawn by John Bergen. You might remember him. He did this huge graphic novel for Kitchen Sink in the 90s called From Inside. Also was part of that great Bonesaw anthology from Tundra. I think he was the co-editor. And he's just a very creepy artist. All of his stuff is very dark, but he's got chops. He's a really good artist. So this takes place in this kind of a post-apocalyptic city. This plague is raging through the city. People are dropping like flies. And the narrator is actually a dead man, a guy who caught the plague and is dead, lying in an alley. The collectors come by, throw him in the cart. They're like those guys in Monty Python, bring out your dead. They gather up the corpses. And we see this city. It's basically New York City, but it's just everything's is shoddy and crappy new stuff has been built over all the old buildings have fallen, except for the Twin Towers, ironically enough. They're still there. That's how we know it's Manhattan. We see everyone in the city looks sickly, probably everyone's dying. They take them out to the Wastelands, which is Central Park. That's where they throw all the dead. And apparently the Wasteland is a mysterious place. There's strange energies that haunt it, ghosts, radioactive fallout. It's kind of like a bizarre negative zone. And our narrator hears a noise and he sees the skeleton get up, and he reaches in between his hips and grabs his coccyx, and he starts basically masturbating with it. It sounds like he's squeezing on it, and finally spinal fluid spurts from the coccyx and the skeleton explodes, and the skull lands near the narrator's head. And that's the story. Very weird, very bizarre stuff. Kind of like it though. If I Close My Eyes Forever. This is adapted from a story by actually I think he might have written this. No, he wrote this comic script. Charles DeLint, famous fantasy author, and it's drawn by Pia Guerra, who you may know her from Why the Last Man. She drew, I think, almost every issue. Now is a very prominent political cartoonist. And this looks like very early stuff from her. Some pretty amateur stuff like these backgrounds. It's weird though, even then she was pretty good at drawing faces. Not all the time, because she got better at that. That was one of her things. Not the most dynamic artist. I kind of thought her art in Why the Last One was a little dull. But man, she could draw great expressive faces. Almost like Kevin Maguire, you know? You could actually see expressions on people's faces. A lot of great comic artists don't even do that. And so we see this woman. She's kind of a private detective, but more just like she finds stuff for people. Nothing too glamorous. This woman named Elise comes into her office one day, and she says, "I want you to find my broken heart. My girlfriend stole it from me." And she says, "I don't really deal with that, miss." And she's like, "No, actually, it's a necklace. It's a heart." And she proceeds to tell her that it was given to her by the fairy, like the fairy folk, you know, like J.R.R. Tolkien shit. And supposedly it gives her second sight and protects her from the bad fairy folk, like trolls and ogres and whatever wandering imps. But see, here's an example. Look how just really well-drawn eyes. She's really good at that. But then here, not so good. She still hasn't gotten it down yet. And the backgrounds are pretty terrible. They're pretty just dull and not very well drawn. So Elise gives her a picture of her ex, and our narrator goes out to the lesbian area of town where the bars are. She shows the picture around, and she finally gets some info. Apparently, this ex works at a strip club, a straight strip club. So she has this long dialogue with a lesbian in there. And as she's walking to the strip club, she's kind of having this interior dialogue with herself, or monologue, kind of questioning her own sexuality, just wondering, how come I never tried that? I think women are beautiful. It just always seemed weird to me. I basically want a cock. I need a hard-on. So she makes it to the strip club. She meets the ex, and the ex informs her that, yeah, Elise was just a little too much into S&M for me, and it was just a little too much. At first, it was kind of fun and exciting. I kind of got addicted to the pain, but it was just too much. See, look at that well-drawn face there. That's really nice. Almost like P. Craig Russell worthy. So that's the problem with this story. It's Charles DeLint is not a comic writer. And this so feels like it's just prose with some drawings around it. Like the art it's just a bunch of talking heads and nothing's really happening. It's not even like the camera angles are doing interesting stuff to make it interesting. Like a really good cartoonist could do that. It's just very text heavy and kind of clunky as comic art. At the end of the conversation, the ex just gives it to the narrator, our protagonist, just gives the heart to her. So before she's trying to get it back to Elise, but Elise isn't showing up. It's been 2 days. She's starting to get worried. And the whole time, she's having these long captions Like, look at this page. It's just her wandering around her house, taking a shower. Just all these captions of her narration. Not very fun. It's a little interesting, though. You know, she's definitely thinking some interesting stuff about, you know, sexuality and also she's worried about Elise. She's like, oh, maybe those bad fairy got her. And it turns out that's what happened. The police tell her that she was found, like, it looks like an animal killed her. So she goes to the graveyard, the same graveyard that we're in that first scene, and she visits Elise's grave. And she kind of, basically, it's kind of a strange ending. The ex's name is Ari, by the way. She says, I'm going to start with Ari and see if together we can break the pattern of her pain. Almost as if just for this few days thinking about being a lesbian, she's now convinced, like, yes, I'm going to hook up with Ari and kind of heal her addiction to pain. Together we'll do it. That's the impression I get. Just seems kind of odd. We see some fairy folk playing around her grave. This next one is Jesting with Chaos. It's an adaptation of a Michael Moorcock Elric story. And it's adapted by this guy, Franz Henkel, and drawn by Shea Anton Pensa. Actually, it's fully painted, with some help from Ted Naife. Ted Naife did a lot of stuff in the 90s for a lot of companies. He was, actually, some of the stuff is really good. Very detailed and ornate stuff. But here's the annoying thing. So there's a painted comic, but it's printed in black and white. So all of this work is kind of for naught. You can tell that Shea Anton Pensa put a lot of work into this. This is like kind of looks like something from Epic Illustrated or something. But it's in black and white. So the story starts off, we see this wretched guy. It looks like he's running from his own god. His god is mad at him. And his name's Teshwan. Teshwan is after him. And Elric shows up. And if you know anything about Elric, you know, he's not a hero. So when this guy asks him for help, Elric's just like, nah, I don't feel like it. Sorry about your predicament, but I got places to be. And the guy's pleading with him. Look at that. That's pretty great. It's pretty nice stuff. And when Elric turns around to leave, he's all like, well, you know, even though Teshwan's mad at me, I still have the power to put a curse on you. He'll attack you, you bastard. And so he summons Teshwan, and Teshwan shows up and just kills him and leaves Elric alone. Dumb sap. So it's really weird, like halfway through the art changes. I don't know if this is where Ted Naife maybe started helping more. It's not nearly as like ornate, and it's a totally different style. He's outside the city, and he meets this guy, and basically the guy's telling him about how this is where the Lords of Chaos lives, and this is the time of change when the Lords of Chaos rest before reforming the world into a fresh variety of patterns. So I guess every millennia or every few centuries, the Lords of Chaos recreate the universe just to keep it from being boring. Keep it from being boring. Sorry about that. I still got this vertigo, guys. It's still fogging up my brain. So I guess he's going to go into the city. He has to get by this big scary guard. And here we see the Lords of Chaos. And they basically reiterate what they're doing, you know, this time of change. But they inform Elric that they are seeking something new. When they reform the universe every few whatever, they just kind of mash stuff up, things that have already existed. What they really want is if anyone can give them like something new, that's truly new, they'd be very grateful. And we see them reforming the universe, just making all this crazy shit, all these crazy Lords of Chaos. And they basically say, you know, like, you're not getting out of here unless you do this. We're going to keep you here forever. So if you want your freedom, you have to give us a paradox and a joke. And I don't really understand this. It says, Elric says, indeed, but look in the man's eyes. I don't even know who he's talking about. And the Lord of Chaos is satisfied. He says, the paradox is good, and we see your point. We have for an eternity created the effect. You, in your pride and innocence, have created the cause. In that, man's mind was all that could ever exist. Have you noted the paradox? No, I haven't. I don't know if I'm dumb or, well, I know I'm not that bright, but I can't tell if I'm just dense or if this is just gobbledygook. And then he asked for the joke. And he says, thank you for the joke. And Elric doesn't even know what he said. He says, the joke? He says, why, truly, the best joke is but a simple statement of truth. Farewell. I don't get that either. So write in the comments below, am I dumb or is Michael Moorcock stupid? Next, we got Dinosaur Love, written by Richard Claw, drawn by this guy named Newt Manwich. That can't be his real name. Looks like he just did a lot of black and white comics. Inked by Little Johnny Lovecloud, which sounds like a very festive Native American name. This one I'm not going to get into too closely. It's pretty dumb. I guess when we started A-bomb testing in the 50s, all these dinosaurs rose up and attacked the world, almost like those dinosaur attack trading cards. But we beat them back down into extinction. And now it's present day. There's this mad scientist who has no head. Well, he has his head in a jar that he carries around. He's got an assistant named Igor. The art's kind of as you can see. And it's just trying to be funny. It's not very funny at all. Very odd. I wouldn't mind if it was just odd and funny, but it's just odd and unfunny. Try to keep my thumbs out of the way so you guys can pause and read it yourself. You can judge for yourself. But I think this one's a waste of space. There is a triceratops with the brain of Marilyn Monroe inside its skull, wearing a dress. That's interesting. That's it. Okay, Mask of the Red Death, adapting Edgar Allan Poe's famous short story. You probably read it in high school. It's adapted by Eric Burnham. Don't know much about that guy. And this is drawn by Ted Nafai, the guy we just saw 2 stories ago. So this is kind of annoying. So this is in color. They sprung for a few color pages. I don't know why they didn't put the Elric story, the fully painted Elric story in the color section. Because this is just line art. And to be honest, the coloring's not very good. It's kind of muddy. I don't know if it was the printer's fault or if the color's fault. But it's just telling the story of Mask of Red Death. You probably know it. Medieval town, this plague is spreading like wildfire. Everyone's dying. This rich duke sequesters himself in his castle, invites all of his best friends, and they just decide to party at Ground Zero while the world is running down. They're making the best of what's still around. And they're just totally oblivious to the suffering of everyone outside. They don't care. They're rich. And they have a masquerade ball one night to alleviate the boredom. And this one guy shows up. And he's wearing this, like, basically suit of pestilence, the Mask of the Red Death. And the Duke is furious. Yeah, because around this time, I've seen Ted Nafai art from the mid-90s, and it's way better than this. I don't know if this was sitting in a drawer for a while. Maybe this was some of the earliest stuff he drew. This is definitely, I've seen way better Ted Nafai than this. So the Duke attacks this guy, and he falls over dead, and apparently he literally is almost like the embodiment of Red Death. His cloak is empty when they catch up to him, and he brings the plague into this compound, into this castle, and within a month everyone's dead. Just like outside, their sanctuary has been ruined. Next, we got Real Thing, written by Nancy A. Collins. She was kind of famous for her horror series Sunglasses After Dark, which were this series of horror books about a vampire detective named Sonia Blu. I kind of like the story. I did not like her at all when she took over Swamp Thing. She took over Swamp Thing, I believe, when Rick Veitch was fired. And they were so bad. I thought they were just so dull. And I'm a huge Swamp Thing fan. I stopped buying them because of her. So, I don't know. Maybe she just can write vampires. It's drawn by this guy named Morgan, who looks like he did a few black and white comics back then. It's that whole 90s kind of like painterly airbrush style. So Sonia Blu's on the trail of this vampire. She basically is a vampire who hunts other vampires. She hears rumors that there's this real vampire hanging out at a goth club. We see these young goth kids, and 3 of them are like, there's a real vampire here. He's 300 years old. His name's Lord Reimer. He's the real deal. He wants to meet you. And she is just like, really? Because, she's like a typical goth girl. She, like, would love to be a vampire. So, I actually knew a guy like that. I worked with him. He wasn't insane. He had a job and friends and was pretty normal. But if you ever talk to him about his vampireness, he really once told me, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to die. I'm eternal. I'm a vampire. It was kind of weird. So the goth kids go to see Lord Reimer. He looks like he's right out of a Universal horror movie. And Shauna is introduced to Lord Reimer. She's totally starstruck. He bites her neck. It's her dream come true. And then all of her friends start licking her bloody neck. They all start having an orgy. They're just like, this is so cool. We're all vampires now. And then the sun's about to come up. So Lord Reimer says, you guys got to go. He gets ready to go to bed in his coffin. He's yawning. And Sonia Blu comes out of the shadows. And she's like, what the hell are you trying to pull here, you poser? You're not a vampire. Only humans think vampires need to sleep in a layer of their own soil. And she knocks over his coffin and punches him. And he tells her his story. He was basically this total loser. And he always thought, like, oh, if I could be a vampire, then people would, women would like me and people would fear me and respect me. So he comes into some money, gets his teeth pulled out, and has fangs put in. And he becomes a vampire, well, a faux vampire. And this just pisses her off even more. So she says, I'm the real thing, creep. He's like, you're a real vampire. Please bite me, drink my blood, turn me into one of you. And this pisses her off even more because she remembers how she was turned into a vampire, against her will, obviously. And she was ravaged by some vampire. She says, you want to be like me? I don't want to be like me. And she loses her shit. And she fucking rips his head off. And she kicks it through the stained glass window. And then she walks out to her next vampire killing. This one's fun. Franklin and the Can of Whoop Ass, written by Bill Kreider. Just some guy, looks like he hasn't written much. Drawn by Tom Fox-Marnick, who I guess drew for Cartoons magazine from 1980 to 1991. Kind of interesting. I guess he also had some stuff in Taboo. So I guess I have more stuff by him because I have all those taboos. So here we go. There's this guy named Franklin. He's just a total doormat his whole life. Everyone's picked on him. Even little girls would beat him up in elementary school. Everyone plays pranks on him. Everyone treats him like shit. One day he sees the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, this girl named Charla. And she's so beautiful that he gets up enough nerve to talk to her. Her boyfriend's right there, though, Ben. And he's all like, what the fuck are you doing, you piece of shit? Meet me after school. I kind of like this guy's art. It kind of reminds me of, like, Bill Ray, sometimes Bob Fingerman. Like, look at that great face there. It's a little inconsistent, but for the most part, I really like this art. So they're outside the school. Man, look at all the detail in there. It's like he really puts the work in. So after school, Ben just beats the shit out of him. Charlotte's laughing the whole time. He realizes he hates them so much. He has this fantasy about killing Ben and assaulting Charlotte. But it's just, a dream. It's not real. So he walks off defeated once again. He's so depressed that he just is walking around the city. It's like late at night. He's in the bad part of town. And he sees these two cars have a collision. This old black guy gets out of one car, and this really tough-looking white guy gets out of the other car. And he's like, why don't you learn how to drive, you motherfucker? He's like, I should pound you into a piece. I should beat the shit out of you right here. But then the old guy just says, I'm Ezra Thibodeau, and I might have to open a can of whoop-ass on you if you keep this up. And all of a sudden, the young guy's like, Thibodeau? Did you say Thibodeau? And he gives him all of his money. And he's like, I'll be by your store tomorrow. I'll bring the rest. Please, I'm sorry. Totally changes his tune and runs off with his tail between his legs. So Franklin goes up to him and just says, can I get a can of whoop-ass? And he kind of tells him his whole story. And he's like, well, usually you need a lot of money for that. But if anyone needs a can of whoop-ass, you do, you loser. There's a total Bill Ray panel right there. God, I like this guy's art. I'm never going to buy a cartoons magazine, though. I've never even had a driver's license. So he says, meet me later at my store. He goes down to the store. Thibodeau takes him to the back. It's like a voodoo shop. And he shows him the can of whoop-ass. But he says, first of all, I got to show you the whoop-ass. You got to see it before you buy it, because you might not want to buy it after I show it to you. And also, you really got to hate the person you sick it on. If you don't really hate them, it's not going to work. So Thibodeau calls up his girlfriend, this young, fine thing. And he all's all like, so I hear you've been fucking Fred Coogan and Troy Farmer. You want to tell me about that? And she's all like, what business is it of yours, old man? You can only fuck once a month anyway. What do you care what I do when I'm not fucking you? And he's like, see what I mean, boy? And he grabs a can of whoop-ass. He earlier told Franklin that he really doesn't hate anyone, but he does hate anyone who fucks him over. So he's gonna opens the can of whoop-ass. This kind of like ghostly hand comes out and like sucks her down into the can. It looks incredibly painful. So she's, I guess, just crushed into this small little can. And so Franklin wants it. It doesn't scare him off, even though it's repulsive. Man, look at that face there. That's a great face. So he's takes the can of whoop-ass, goes to school the next day, challenges Ben to meet him after school. This time, he's the challenger. And when Ben comes to punch him, he opens the can of whoop-ass. But he realizes that the person he hates the most in the world is himself. He hates himself for being so cowardly that he can't even hate Ben and Charlotte enough to put the can of whoop-ass on him. So the ghostly hand attacks him and shoves him down into the can very violently. Everyone's barfing. Apparently it's very repulsive. And then I guess no one ever saw Franklin again. And no one missed him at all. Oh, God, that's so horrible. That's like more horrific than any scary story in this comic, Just the fact of dying and nobody missing you at all. Chip of Fools is next, written by Chet Williamson, another kind of popular horror author. I think he had a bunch of best-selling novels. And he also did an Aliens miniseries for Dark Horse, drawn by John Piccaccio. And another guy doesn't seem like he did much. So we see these detectives investigating a crime. Now we flash back, and there's this guy named Ron, and he's on a what do you call it, a chat page. I didn't do computers until like the 2000s, so I missed all that early computer stuff. He's on a, yeah, let's call it a chat page, a chat room. And he keeps getting kicked off of him because he's an asshole. He's an obnoxious jerk. But one day he finds this chat room. It's called The Web, and it's run by this woman named Charlotte. And it's almost like he instantly kind of has a crush on her. This is how he pictures her. Of course, he doesn't know what she looks like. This is before Facebook and Zoom and stuff. But he's kind of has a crush on her. There's two other people in this chat room, also artists, because Ron is a writer. And after a while, they kind of drop out. And it's just him. It's just Ron and Charlotte on the thing. He assumes that it's just because, yeah, he rubs people the wrong way that they stopped getting into the chat room. He stops writing completely and reading, for it's more fulfilling to tell Charlotte about what he had written and the glorious things he would write. So he's kind of becoming very obsessive about Charlotte. It's kind of funny that this artist, he's not quite there. He could be in a few years, it looks like. But he's really good at drawing this Charlotte face. And it's always from the same angle. I think he just learned how to draw this angle of Charlotte's face pretty well. Because nothing else looks that good. So he tells Charlotte how, I don't want to do anything except talk to you. And something strange has been happening. It's like people can't see me. It's like I'm fading away. And she says there's nothing to be afraid of. You don't need other people. You just need someone who understands. You need me. Don't be afraid, Ron. You're just coming closer to me, and soon we'll be together. And then we cut back to the detectives, and we see what happened to Ron. It's almost like he's a mummified husk. Even though he's only been missing for like 2 weeks, it looks like he's as desiccated as if he was in a desert for 100 years. Completely drained. And I guess he's the third person they found like this. The other two people from the chat room who dropped out, they were found like this. They tracked down the signal from the computer where Charlotte's coming from. It's this dude who has no idea what they're talking about, and he has a good alibi. He was out of town for 2 weeks. And when they crack open the back of the computer, they find all the spider webbing and this big, fat, juicy spider. It drops to the floor, and instinctively the detective steps on it, and they're all amazed at how much blood was in it. So I guess Charlotte was this weird sentient spider using this computer and somehow draining people's life force through the wires. Pretty dopey. And that art's kind of annoying. Next one, Man with Legs. This is a very weird story. It's written by Al Sarantonio. I guess he wrote stories for heavy metal and some other things. And it's drawn by Doug Potter. He did a lot of stuff for Kitchen Sink in the 90s, Chips and Vanilla, Denizens of Deep City. Always kind of drew like in a funny cartoony style, but he's drawing straight in this one. And it's okay. Some of the panels are a little wonky, but he does a pretty good, straight cartoony, straight drawing. Very weird story. It really doesn't even make sense, but it's got this creepiness to it. So these two, this brother and sister, are looking for this house. And they find it. The sister seems to know what she's talking about. She's like, I told you it was real. And they knock on the door. And this guy comes out. And the daughter says, Father? And she says, you're our father. And he kind of seems not that shocked. He just says, oh, can that be possible? Mother told us you died. She said that you had an accident on the railroad and your legs were chopped off. And he just seems so that's interesting. They said, why did you leave? I had to go away. And he leaves the room to get him some hot cocoa. So the brother goes off to find a bathroom, and he finds this basement. And when he goes downstairs, he sees all of these legs, chopped off legs of other people. Like, I don't know, like 50, 60 pairs of them. All kinds of legs, all lengths and sizes. And when he turns around to tell Nellie, she's already there, his sister. And Nellie seems to know what's going on. She says, he told me everything. He wants us to stay. He's not bad. Most of his legs he dug up. I need him to be Father Willie. And Willie just wants to go home, and he hugs his sister. He feels these straps on her back, and he shoves her away. He says, you. And she says, I can be anything in this room. I could be the man who delivers flowers. I could be a little girl or a little boy. And then she comes up the stairs after him. Look how creepy she looks there. That is scary. And when he kicks her, she kind of just falls apart, her body. And it looks like this larvae comes out of her, like he was just using this body as a meat puppet. And he runs away, crawls away, going, no. So he runs out the door, and he sees the bus outside, and he's heading for the front door. And we see this high-heeled leg stop it. And the father says, walk with me, won't you? So, I mean, that story makes no sense at all. It's really weird, but it's got this nightmarish quality to it that's really creepy to me. And, you know, pretty okay art. This next one I really like. It's called King of the Cows. It's written by Scott Cupp. And I guess he's written some short fiction in the 90s. And the artist is Matthew Guest. And I guess this guy wrote and illustrated some stuff for Fantagraphics. I really like his style, this guy. So we see this butcher in this small town. It's Easter morning. He's heading to work. He thinks about how that morning his wife had a bad nightmare the night before. And she's all like, don't go to work, honey. But he says, I gotta. It's Easter Sunday. It's a busy day. So he gets to work. His partner takes the counter, and he starts butchering cows. At one point, his partner needs to ask him a question, so he comes out back, and he conks him on the head with the door. And he's okay, but he kind of blacks out for a second. He's got a little cut in his head. But he's just like, yeah, I can get back to work. I'm good. Don't worry about it. Then the nightmare began, and then the cows start talking to him. We bring this one before you for justice. He claims to be the king of the cows. He teaches against the laws of cattle and men and would destroy us all. You must put him to death. And the narrator says, the blow to my head had made me mad. I was hearing voices. But he totally starts talking to these cows. And all the cows are saying, slaughter him, slaughter him. And then we see even the cow kind of turns into Jesus for a second. And then he turns into Pontius Pilate. And then his fantasy full on takes over. Would you crucify your king? But then look at this here. This totally reminds me of kind of like a lazier Joe Coleman. I mean, this is great, I think. But, you know, Joe Coleman would have added like 75 more lines to every inch of this. But yeah, really good style. So just like Pontius Pilate, he's talking to the Jesus cow. Where are your legion of cow angels to save you? And then he just ends up killing him. And he guts him. And he kind of loses his mind. He feels this insane guilt for killing the bovine god. And he runs out of the butcher shop. I killed him. I killed the bull. And he says, I wash my hands of the whole damn lot of you. That's what I'm supposed to say, isn't it? And the cows are back to normal, so they just go moo. So he runs home to his wife. They pray for hours. And then soon the heavens opened and God unleashed his wrath on the small town. We heard tales of those who saw ghastly visions of the dead cows who walked through the storm. I bear the mark of his death on my hands. Man, I love that one. That's a good one. In Repose, this story is written by Mark Paoletti. Looks like he hasn't written much. And drawn by Michael Lark. You probably know him. He's done tons of stuff for like Vertigo. He did stuff for Byron Price. I think he had a run on Daredevil for a while even in the 2000s. Really good cartoonist, really good stylist. I love his stuff. Well, I don't know if stylist is the word. It's not like he's doing anything crazy. But just a really good storyteller and good illustrator. So we see London 1880. We see this mortician. These guys drop off this body. It seems like he does some shady stuff on the side. Like he gets these bodies late at night and just to practice his mortician artistry. He's kind of like the Michelangelo of morticians. And we realize he's kind of crazy. He's just talking to this corpse as if it's a person. Seems pretty lonely. Man, just look at this great drawing. It's like John Watkiss or something, just like... And he's pretty young here. Michael Lark got even better. So he goes to his house, and this guy loves birds so much, he just lets birds fly all over his house. Just look at this page. The black and white and the storytelling, the backgrounds. This is just kind of masterful stuff. This is pretty amazing. So when he gets up to his study, his dead wife, is in this glass coffin, and he reads poetry to her every night. So we realize this guy's pretty nuts. The next day he goes to the park. Look at this, the way he draws the trees here and the leaves. That is like just some great European artist or something. I also somehow can't help but think of pre-rubber blanket David Mazzucchelli when he drew straighter, wasn't as expressive. But whatever it is, it looks great. And he sees this woman who appears to be dead lying in the grass, but she's just resting. As soon as she wakes up, she instantly seems to take a liking to him. She's like, oh, please don't go. And they chat for a little while, and she's basically inviting him to her father's house for a big party that night. His father's very rich and powerful. And she says, oh, his parties are so boring. I would love if you came. So he goes. He meets the father, meets all these famous, bigwigs, And her father says, oh, I understand you like birds a lot. I got this fancy South American bird someone gave him as a gift, and he doesn't seem to be doing well. Doesn't want to eat his food. And the protagonist, the mortician, gets furious. Starts yelling at him. He says, what if you were taken from your mansion and trapped in the Sahara Desert? You're not even feeding him the right food. He needs fruits and insects. He's from the jungle. He says, by caging that bird, you have taken away its habits, struggles, joys, freedoms, those very things that make it beautiful. To appreciate anything, to truly covet beauty, you must capture its essence and let the body go. Its freedom is only an illusion. However, for you will have gained something far more impressive than the physical. You will have captured its soul. So maybe that's why he's a mortician. He's got this weird philosophy about life. It's weird. The father he's just kind of like, oh, well, thanks for the information. Let's go to dinner now. He's not even that mad. And the daughter's kind of thrilled. She's like, oh, I never saw anyone talk to my father like that before. Let's go to your house. I want to see your birds. So he takes her home. She's loving the birds flying around. And he gives her some wine that's spiked. He carries her out to his tool shed or some little laboratory he has on his property. And when she wakes up later, she's fine. And he says, oh, you must have passed out from the wine. I've ordered you a carriage. Your father must be worried. I'll see you soon. And she leaves. And then he goes up to the study and takes the face mask off of his wife's skull. That was just a face mask. And he's got a new one of that woman. Puts it on her face. grabs the old face mask, puts it on the wall with scores of other ones, and then he reads to her. So it's such a strange little creepy horror story. Like, he doesn't really do anything that bad. All he does is take a facial cast of a woman while she's asleep. But I guess in his mind, he's stealing the essence of her beauty, maybe. So I guess he's doing something heinous. But it's, compared to most horror stories, he's pretty tame. This next one is called Trolling. It's written by F. Paul Wilson. Pretty big horror writer in the 80s. You might know him from The Keep. They made a movie of that in the 80s. And it's drawn by Bill D. Fountain. And this guy's got this really weird primitive style. Very inconsistent, very crazy, all over the place. So the narrator of this is this kind of monster woman, Carly. She calls herself The Carly. So it's like the Carly fine needle man on way home. She sees this junkie in an alley, and this junkie threatens her with a razor. And when he sees her face, he runs screaming. And Carly climbs the walls. We realize she's not a normal woman here. She's got these long, crazy animal claws. She gets to her apartment, and she lives with her mother, who's blind. And we finally get a glimpse of Carly. Look at that. This is like some stuff like X-No would draw. You know those kind of ugly 80s artists? It's a very crude, but very horrifying. I kind of like that. It's scary. And Carly tells his mom, hey, we got to go trolling again. We're out of money. So they go out into the night. And basically they do this every few weeks. The mother sits in a park late at night and waits for bad guys to fuck with her. And if they do, Carly takes care of them. So these two guys try to mug her. Carly grabs one of them, and then the other one. I like this how she just puts one finger right through his chin. Kills him. So if someone comes up who's just asked, a nice guy, this guy just comes up and says, hey, are you okay, old lady? Need any help? Okay, and Carly lets him live. This other mugger comes up. Carly takes care of him too. Just look at the crazy, so many different art styles in every page even. All kind of crude and weird. A little off. So then we see the muggers are still in this tree. All their faces have been ripped off. That's why she's known as the facelift killer. And then look at this. Totally weird shading here. Totally different than anything else. And so after their successful trolling night, Carly goes to watch television. And a tear comes from her eye. Because she wants to take a pretty woman's face to put on her own. So very many pretty faces on TV. This next one's called Green Brother. It's adapted from a story by Howard Waldrop, pretty prominent sci-fi author. And it's adapted by another sci-fi author, Steve Utley. I think those guys wrote together too sometimes. And this is drawn by John Lucas. And I totally forgot about this. I was reading this last night. On this blank page, I guess I must have bought this at a Comic-Con. John Lucas drew this beautiful dinosaur for me. And I know I didn't pay for it. I never pay for anything because I'm cheap. And really nice of him. I want to email that guy and thank him. That's a beautiful drawing. It's actually better drawn than the comic itself. So we see this reporter. He's on a reservation talking to this old Native American. And the Native American tells him a story about the old times back in the late 1800s when the Native Americans were still roaming free. And when he's a young brave, he's telling his grandfather that he's like, I still haven't had my vision quest yet. I want my new name. Because I guess when you go on a vision quest, when you come back, you pick the name of the spirit animal as your new name or a variation thereof. Also at the same time, there's American soldiers in this fort, in this territory. And pretty much the Indians have been laying siege to it for a while. They don't have enough ammunition to take over the fort, but as soon as they leave the fort to get firewood or anything, the Indians attack them. So there's lots of kind of fun action scenes, cowboys versus Indians. But then finally, the protagonist, he has a vision quest, but he says, "Grandfather, I have a problem. I need help with my new name. I saw an animal on my vision quest, but I don't know what it is. I've never seen this animal, so I don't know what it's called. And then I can't make a new name for myself." So the grandfather's like, I never heard of that. So I'll try to help you. He also tells him that he knows where this animal is buried. That was part of his vision. Oh, and then before that, I'm sorry, we see his vision quest. And look, it's a T-Rex. That's why he couldn't name it. And he felt a great kinship with the beast. So he asked for a shovel. And apparently it's right near the fort, this buried T-Rex. So he starts excavating. It takes him a while. And when he digs deep enough, he finds it, the skull of a T-Rex. But the American soldiers see him out there, and they come out. And they attack him. And the kid says, come alive, spirit animal." And the bones of the T-Rex rise up and kill the American soldiers. And then we're back in the present. And he says, "I think what you saw was, we call that a dinosaur." He's like, "You're crazy." He basically just says, "Leave me alone now. I've talked to you long enough." And that's how the story ends. "And I only am escaped to tell thee." This is an adaptation of a Roger Zelazny story. You probably know Roger Zelazny, famous science fiction author, won the Hugo and Nebula many times. It's adapted by this guy, Paul O. Miles. The art's by Barb and Theodore Spoon, who I guess were, they put out small press erotic comics. In the 90s, I guess their current project was designing the first sex shop in Moscow to feature genital piercing. So I hope they did well with that venture. And here's the story. Oh, it's pretty nice, pretty okay. And basically we start off the story, this guy's on the ship. It seems like no one else is on it. And his captions are talking about how he's got to get off this cursed ship, this damned ship. The captain has damned us all. And he sees a ship coming up in the distance. So he throws a barrel overboard, and he jumps overboard and uses the barrel as kind of a life raft. And he kind of kicks over to the ship. They pull him up into the hold. And, he tells them the story, and the captain says, "Oh my God, you were actually on the Flying Dutchman. There truly is such a thing, and you are the only man who has escaped from it. Rest easy, my friend, for you are saved now and free of the demon ship. Welcome aboard the Marie Celeste." So this is just a dumb gag. I don't know if you guys know about the Marie Celeste. I guess it was one of those things you'd see on In Search Of in the 70s. Some missed ship in the 1800s. They found it with all this food. The ship wasn't damaged, and the whole crew was missing, and nobody ever saw them again, and found out what happened to them. That could be something that's like in a DC mystery comic. Case of the Dancing Corpse, written by Jerry Prosser. He did a lot of stuff for Dark Horse in the 90s, and he even did Animal Man for DC Vertigo. And it's drawn by Jason Morgan. I think he's a British guy. And it's kind of weird, interesting story. We see this beat cop, and one day this detective comes up to him. He's like, "Hey, I need your help on this case. Come with me." And they go to this kind of weird mansion, and the butler takes them inside. And it's almost like Ripley's Believe It or Not museum in there. There's all these crazy curios and bizarre things on the wall, sarcophagi, mounted mooses. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. And then they meet Dr. D, who's in this iron lung. And it seems like the detective and Dr. D have worked together before. And he says, yep, this is my new man who's going to help out this beat cop. And all of a sudden, the butler comes up behind him and injects this fluid into his neck. And when the guy wakes up, he wakes up in this weird room, and Dr. D's walking around. He says, oh, it's because this is your mind. You have a very cluttered mind. And he basically says, I need to take over your body. Don't resist or you might die. The more you resist, the worse off it'll be for you. This is another one of those artists where I'd like to see where he would have gone in a few years. It's pretty nice. But there's some really like glimpses of like, wow, this guy could be really good. Because it's a little, you know, a little inconsistent here and there. So he goes to investigate this murder using the cop's body, you know. And when he's at the morgue, this guy comes back from the dead. And look at this horrible tongue. He's all like trying to kill the cop. And Dr. D, you know, using the cop's mouth, bites the tongue off. And that is just too much for the cop. He passes out. When he wakes up, he's back in the mansion. And Dr. D informs him that he feels very satisfied with the mission because he has a human tongue, which I guess is a very powerful talisman if you're into sorcery or something, you know. This next one's called Heilige Nacht. Neil Barrett Jr. writes, Omaha Perez draws. This is a very strange story. This is like just basically a true nightmare. Very strange. Takes place in Christmas Eve, 1949, San Antonio, Texas. It appears that the Nazis won World War II and are now in control of America. Not that it really matters for the story, because this is just a dreamlike story. And almost all the dialogue's in German, which makes it even more kind of confusing and opaque. So it's snowing for the first time in forever in San Antonio. Everyone's kind of wigging out. This Nazi goes up to his, I don't know who this guy is, this big, weird guy. He's in the middle of this orgy with all these bald women. And he says, it's snowing, it's snowing. And he's like a little kid. He gets all excited. And he starts singing Christmas carols, Christmas songs. And then he puts on this Santa Claus outfit with swastikas on it. And he has a sleigh with 2 dogs pulling it. And he heads to the orphanage. And they have a big dinner. We see how he's pretty unhinged. He just like takes his big turkey leg and hits one of his subordinates, knocks him off his chair. Just really bizarre stuff. I guess this guy studied under Baron Story, the famous illustrator, you know, and art teacher. You can really, this is a great panel. Look at that. But just unfortunately, the rest is so inconsistent. There's some great panels here and there, but it's just not quite there 100%. But man, that's nice. And then he's even crying while he's singing Silent Night at one point. And then I guess he says something like, I think he says it's time for presents. And all the kids run towards him. And they don't like try to get presents. They just basically tear him apart, it looks like. And they pull the kids off and they find the guy. It looks like they bit off his other leg, his good leg, and just wounded him all over. As they take him away on a stretcher, he seems kind of okay, though. He's just waving at everyone. They march the kids out they got blood all over their mouths. And he rides off in a sleigh. And I'm pretty sure in German he's saying, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. And a piece of his corpse, or not his corpse, a piece of his body seems to fall off the sleigh. Oh no, one of the kids has one of his body parts. Oh my God, I think that's his penis. And this dog comes up and carries it away. And that's the end. Fucking weird story, man. Very strange. This is called Oil of the Dog. It's based on an Ambrose Bierce story, one of the great literary figures of the 19th century. You probably know him from The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, adapted by Neil Barrett Jr. once again, and drawn by Dean Rohrer, who did a bunch of stuff for Fantagraphics and The New Yorker even. This guy's got a pretty good style. Very strange story once again. It seems to take place in this other reality. It's not our world. This guy is named Boffer Bings. His parents have very weird jobs. His father is a manufacturer of dog oil, which I guess in this world is like a very powerful medicine. His mother, her job is to dispose of unwelcome babes. And she's not an abortionist. She actually, even if your babe's born, it's like 1 or 2, and you don't want it, she'll get rid of it for you. So, he helps his parents out. He procures dogs' bodies. He also disposes of the babies, throws them in the river after they're dead. He always has to watch out for the city guard, because obviously his mom's job is not smiled upon. We see the father and mother here, plying their trades. So one night, Boffer's coming home he's heading out to dispose of a baby, but it seems like the city guards just have their eye on him all night, and he can't get away. So he just goes home, and he says, "Fuck it, no one will ever know. I'm gonna throw this baby corpse in my dad's dog oil vat. It'll just dissolve. Who's gonna know? Why risk it?" Oops, did I miss a page? No. So the next day, his father is surprised at how good the dog oil is that day. He's like, "I've never made such good dog oil. There's something amazing about this, the quality of this." And the son fesses up. He expects them to get mad, but they're kind of thrilled. They're like, "Oh my God, we could change our whole business model. I take care of babies, and instead of having to dispose them in the river, we'll throw them in the vat. In fact, we won't even use dogs anymore." So because of this, she starts killing more than just unwanted children. She starts luring children, even older children, with candy and treats so she can throw them in the vat, and they can make basically baby oil now, which I guess is way better. So I guess people start to notice that all the kids are missing. And there's a trial, and it's so weird. They don't sentence them to be hanged or anything. They just say, "Hey, cut it out. Stop taking the kids." So, this is obviously a different world we're dealing with here. The parents came home from this meeting brokenhearted. So the son says, "I'm going to sleep in the barn tonight." About midnight, he looks into the house through the window. He sees his father with a rope heading towards his mother's bedroom door. And then almost at the same time, the mother comes out with a knife. And they start trying to kill each other. I guess they want one more batch. They're so desperate to have one more batch of this great human oil that they're going to try to kill each other to throw each other in the vat. So they're both pretty wounded, and they both end up falling into the vat and become part of the oil. And they die, of course. And then the next day, the son just takes off. He's like, "Yeah, I probably worn out my welcome in this town. I'm probably not very, I don't think they want me around." So he takes off. And that's the end of the story. We see a photo of Robert Bloch here. I guess he died a year before this came out. So this is dedicated to Robert Bloch, the whole book. So there you have it, guys. A very unusual anthology. Weird business. Hope you enjoyed looking at it. I'm pretty sure you could find this in some bookstore randomly for nothing. I don't think anybody really cares about this. I think there's some really good stuff in it, though. Of course, there's a lot of goofy stuff, too. But overall, if you can find it cheap, it's not a bad thing to own. So that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. And I also hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.